You're listening to the GC Collaborative Podcast, a resource for the worship arts team at Grace Church.
Welcome to the GC Collaborative Podcast.
Welcome.
Yes, it's another month has passed, so that means it is time for some GC Collaborative ear candy.
And the ear candy can't get any more candier than what the candy's going to be like this month.
Oh my gosh. Hey, welcome to the show. We are glad you're listening. My name's Ben Abusada. I'm the worship and Director of Worship Communications at Grace Church in Overland Park / Olathe. And to my right or left, because he's sitting across the room, is the Luke Lauber. Yeah. Anything new in your life that you want to share with the people?
I'm just excited to be here, man. Just can't believe I'm here with you guys and just excited and just living the dream.
Do you know what I realized? I don't know if you actually shared with the world the upcoming life change that is happening for you.
Oh, I didn't know. Do we share personal things on here?
I think this is, yeah.
I thought we were just sharing purely robotic type things that, were not sentimental or heart.
No. We're going to share some heart. Tell the people what's happening in your world. Tell the people what is happening in your life this April 9th.
Oh, well, I actually got engaged over New Year's. So, yes. So, started off 2021 with bang, which is awesome. And yes, we are getting married April 9th. So, the next podcast that you hear will be 9 days.
Yes. Congratulations, my friend. That's awesome to you and Bailey both.
Yes, wonderful. Absolutely. I'm sorry. I got so distracted because I heard like a thumping sound.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's being picked up or not. But,
it probably is, but
Student
that's okay.
Ministries is gearing up for the Wednesday night stuff.
Is it snowing? Is it hailing? What's going on?
So we've got a unique show today. I think we're getting to talk to one of our production crew, and we're excited about this one. This is Cody VanHoozen. Cody VanHoozen. Who is? We are very blessed. This guy he's awesome. He's just a great human being and super talented. And it's amazing to me that the people that the Lord brings to Grace Church. And I'm sure I haven't listened to the interview yet, but I'm sure you guys are unpacking his story of getting here at some point.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. A very I wish I told him 1,000 times in the podcast. I wish we could go deeper into his background, but oh my goodness, it's such a cool story.
We're gonna have to do another episode with him just to hear his full story. But yeah, hopefully you guys will enjoy this. This is it's March, so there's not been a lot happening in February. That at the time when we record this, what is today?
This is
10th, 11th?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what happens between the 11th and when this is released, but hopefully no worldwide crazy events that we're ignoring.
Don't say that.
And if so, just know we recorded this early February. So
yeah, if you're listening to this on 8-track, we
whoops, missed it.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah. Anyway, Luke, anything you want to set this up for people?
Well, no, it's just going to be a great time. I'm not going to build him up at all because I brag on him for the whole time during the interview. So, but no, he's a amazing guy, and just hearing his heart and his brain and how it all functions. And I say it a couple times in the interview, but the science and the art of how he combines those two and audio is just an awesome thing. So it's just fun to unpack his brain a little bit. So I think you guys are really going to love it. All right, everybody, welcome to this month's GC Collaborative Podcast. It is March 1st, and we could not be more excited to be interviewing / I won't even say interviewing because that'll put a weird context over this whole thing. We're just having a conversation with the man, the myth, the legend, Cody VanHoozen. Audio man extraordinaire. And I actually looked up your job title on the Grace Church website. I've learned so much about people's job titles from this podcast because I always look them up. You are the production technical engineer. Did you know that?
I did.
Ooh, that's nice. I had to dictionary look up all 3 of those words.
Oh, good.
How are you, man?
I'm doing well, dude.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
We're so glad
to be
you're
here.
on here. So a little bit of backstory on Cody. I'll give you backstory, and then we'll let him give backstory as well. But he is actually the mastermind. One, for those of you listening to this podcast, he is always the one that we give it to, and he edits and brings the voices to a beautiful level. So it would actually sound way different if he did not put his, I call him unicorn fingers. I don't know. He probably doesn't appreciate that.
I do only have one each.
one unicorn on each hand. But he puts his magic on it, and it makes it way, way better. If we did a post or pre and post of what he does to these, you'd hear a very big difference.
You don't want to put them through that.
No, yeah, that would be horrible. He makes my voice sound a lot better than it normally does. Usually it's a lot higher. But then on the other side of it, on the weekends, he runs audio for South and helps out with the other campuses and their boards and training. And then he's helped out with projects that we've released under GC Collaborative. He does the online service, the more recent ones. I can't remember when you started post mixing, probably like October, November, somewhere in there.
So. Yeah.
So he's the man behind everything, and he is a huge, huge blessing, not only to Grace as a whole, but just to my life personally. I know we've had many conversations that I've just felt super inspired after and wanted to go change the world after, and so I could think of no better person to have on the podcast this month than you, and to just talk, man, and just to have conversations and hopefully bring the conversations that we've gotten to have one-on-one just out into the open, and hopefully people leave just inspired and encouraged by you. So
all right on, man.
That's just the intro.
Certainly glad to be here.
That's just the intro.
Buckle up.
Yeah, get ready. That's only the first 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Hello, here we go. No, but in all seriousness, tell us a little bit about yourself. How you got one of the coolest stories ever. I love every time we sit down. So we've known each other for a year, maybe more.
Over a year now. October of last year was my first.
Has it really been wow.
Yeah.
So this October will be 2 years.
2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Coming
about a year
on
and
2.
6 months-ish, give or take a few. And so every time I hear about your past, there's always new parts of it that I'm like, holy smokes, that is amazing. But just give us the 3 to 5 minute. I know that's always exciting because there's so much. But 3 to 5 minute, where have you been? How'd you get to Grace? Little history of Cody VanHoozen.
Well, I started back in 4th grade. I first picked up an instrument. I played a cello in the jazz band at my old school.
Love it.
And then the marching band needed somebody, so I moved to electric bass, kind of sideways. And then throughout the years, I learned guitar and piano and drums. I can play quite a few instruments. And then when I was 17, I had done a couple records with the band I was in at the time, this metal band, Osculation.
Yes.
Which means a kiss, because we were so emo.
No way. That's amazing. Yeah. I love it.
And then I had joined this other band called The Closure Project with a friend of mine, Kenny Finn. And Kenny had this little home recording setup. And instead of paying to get our album done by somebody else, we had done it ourselves. And it came out pretty bad sounding, but and so I was like, but that was my first spark into audio, the audio side of it. I had always been a musician prior to that, playing in bands and touring and that kind of thing. And then that was the first time I was like, oh, dang, well, this side of it's just as fun. Mm-hmm. So I bought a little home recording setup and did a few acoustic things at home, recorded a few of my friends. And
what year was that around?
This was 2005, end of 2005, early 2006.
Yep.
And then I decided, man, I should really pursue this because I kind of had a knack for it. I've always been into computers and that kind of stuff. So it was just learning another program really. But then I wanted to learn the science behind the audio portion of it. So I decided to go to audio engineering school, and I went to, at the time they were called Soundmasters College. And later, while I was there, they actually changed their name to Pinnacle Recording Arts.
Love it.
And there I learned how to produce bands more efficiently. I learned mixing and mastering techniques. I took a live sound course there. I also learned programming video game music and stuff like that there.
Man.
And then right out of school, I graduated in 2007. It was a 9-month, 6-day-a-week program, and it was really intense. I was working overnight at the time, but I really wanted to do this, so I was trying to do that, and the band I was still trying to do. And right out of audio college, I started interning at a couple recording studios out in LA, Hollywood area. I did a couple things at Hollywood Records. I did some stuff with Lionsgate.
Did you ever meet Brad Pitt?
I didn't meet Brad Pitt.
Neither have I.
Most famous
I don't know why that person came to my mind.
Was
just Brad Pitt out of nowhere. I'm sorry.
Was Juliette Lewis, she was like a 90s actress. But
okay.
The way I met her, I was renting a 24-hour lockout for my band that I turned into a recording studio.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this 4-story building in Boyle Heights, and like the bottom floor was a carpet factory, and the third floor was like a t-shirt company, but the second and fourth floor, they rented all the rooms out to bands. So there was just like 24 hours a day music. But because it was all creatives, like it was just a cool place to be, walking the halls, you're like, that guy looks really familiar. I bet he's in this band from LA. You know? And this one, the door was a key card entry. And this one time I walked up, and this girl was stuck at the door, and she's like, I forgot my key card. Can you let me in? And I'm swiping, and actually Kenny, the guy I mentioned earlier, he's with me. And I hadn't really looked at her. And Kenny, he's like, hey, aren't you famous? To this girl. And I'm like having a heart attack because like it's the first time I've brought him to LA and like shown him this area. And then she's amazing. Like, yeah. And then I like look, and there's another girl, I can't think of her last name now, but it was a singer of an indie band, but it was also Juliet something. But not her name, right? And I like look at Kenny, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's Juliet, this person. And she's like, no. And then I immediately, because I knew who she was, but I had just swapped the names.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
But it was one of those, like, then every time I saw her, I was like, I know who you are, I swear.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
But that was my famous actor story, and from Hollywood.
I love it.
So then after I interned a while at studios out there, this studio hired me out in Pasadena called the Den Recorders, and they were a really great studio. I'm not close friends with them anymore, but we still are friendly. I chat with them on occasion. And, but that was kind of where I got my foot in the door, working all the time. I was recording bands constantly there, while I was also a manager at Guitar Center. So I was kind of splitting my time between every free moment I had. I was recording bands, and then I was the manager at Guitar Center, so I was constantly working too. And in a weird turn of events, I got offered a promotion at Guitar Center where they offered me to move up the corporate ladder, essentially from manager to more of a corporate position. And it was going to pay well and X, Y, and Z, but it was going to eat up all of the free time I had. And they offered me the job, and I was really excited about it at the time. And I said, but I need to, think about it, obviously.
Yeah.
And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I don't just want a job that's at a music place. Like, I wanted to pursue music. That's the whole reason I came to LA. It's the whole reason I wanted to start doing recordings and this kind of stuff. So I came in, and I was like, hey guys, I appreciate the offer, but I quit. And they were blindsided because I was like a good manager. And, they wanted to help me move up. And they're like, what happened? And I was like, well, just weighing the pros and cons, I realized while this may be the smarter thing to do financially, it's not what like my soul is calling me to do. And the manager there, his name was Zach, he was like, I just don't want you in 10 years to come apply back at another Guitar Center and realize you should have never quit in the first place. And I was like, well, that's kind of a risk I got to take. I need to know if this is something I should really pursue.
Yeah.
And so I was just running my studio in LA full time. I had this, it was just me doing my own stuff. I just did it as Cody VanHoozen, and I was producing a lot of bands out of there. And then I produced a friend of mine who later became a friend of mine band. He was a drummer, and he played drums at this church a couple hours away in another town. And he was like, hey man, our church can you come help us set up our sound system? And I was like, sure, I know live sound a bit. And I went down there and I helped them get set up, and then word of mouth, that pastor told another pastor in town. And pretty soon I was down in this San Diego area doing audio for all these churches all the time. And this one pastor who I came and set up his sound system, he then found out I was a musician, and they had a big Easter event they would do. And he asked me to come play guitar for this Easter event. And I was like, I would love to. So I did that. And then in talking with him, he was like, oh, would you want to mix? We have a special guest artist, this Christian artist, Sarah Kelly. And she was coming in. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come mix for you. And I mixed for their special concert night. And then that pastor was like, bro, we got to have you all the time. What would it take for you to come mix here?
Wow.
And I was still, I was living in LA, but I was driving back and mixing for this church on the weekends or coming to help other places. And I was like, okay, well, this will be the crux, if I go do this, I'm going to be leaving LA behind and coming back down to the Inland Empire and doing stuff there. But I did, and I came and I ran sound for that church for a long time, 10 years actually. And I was doing, in between that, I was doing my own music still. Because they only needed me on the weekends, I was able to still stay in my bands and travel a bit. And towards the end I stopped touring with the bands I was in, and I was just producing artists out of my house. I had a house that had a studio in it. And then I was working at this church on the weekends. And then my wife and I decided that due to some life circumstances, we just wanted to make the most of what was going on in life and what we had left to live of it. So we sold our house. I sold my studio, everything in it. And we bought an RV and traveled around doing wildlife photography. And then I was I was still making music on my laptop. So I was doing remote mixing and stuff. Yeah. But then I was still working at this church on the weekend. So we would travel around and then come back to this Southern California church for a while. And we, in a weird turn of events, we thought we couldn't get pregnant. And then we found out we were pregnant after 4 years of trying. Yeah. And then it was okay, well, we can't. At that time, we had downsized to a van, so we were like, well, we can't raise a baby in a tiny little van. And I opened my phone up, and I was on Facebook.
Now, just to put a little story, this is one of the coolest stories and most crazy stories of just how God works that I've heard in a long, long time. So I just want to set this up a little bit, because I know you, and you just go through life, and you have so many stories that I'm like, wait, how did you just go through that so quickly? This is crazy. Right. So I just want to preface this with, this is one of the coolest, crazy little stories I've ever heard in my life, this part. So continue. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. And so I was talking to my wife, and I was like, well, I don't think Southern California is where we want to raise our baby and settle down, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so we had just kind of had that conversation, but we hadn't decided anything other than it'd be nice to get out of here. But I had been at this church for 10 years. Yeah. We were well established both in our arts and my studio, and all the churches knew me around there by then. And, it was just talk of leaving. We weren't planning on leaving California. It was just
And you were doing other things too. I know you talked about you were mixing live stuff, correct? Mm-hmm. Other places in Hollywood and stuff like that. And then
I did live sound for bands in LA and San Diego.
And working with film stuff too, and kind of that as well. Yeah. So you were very...
Yeah, I did some stuff. I did a Doritos commercial for the Super Bowl once.
Yeah, so you were very...
Lots of product placement I did. I scored a couple indie films. And
you worked didn't you work in one of those studios where you did the sound effects?
Yeah, a Foley studio. Yeah. When I was interning at Lionsgate, I was working on the Foley set. So you see somebody walking through gravel, and it was one of the coolest things. The Foley set there, they had these little sandboxes that were maybe 10 feet wide, and each one had a different kind of ground in it, a little bit of gravel, one was grass, one had a little water in it. And
so cool.
We were working on a horror movie, I remember, and it was somebody getting stabbed in the belly. And the way we had to recreate the sound was we had this big old pot of spaghetti noodles with water in it. And like we were just, you're just punching the spaghetti, but then you line it up to the movie and you put it in, and it's, and it's just one of those hilarious things where once you've been on the other side, that you're like, that's how they make those sounds,
That's hilarious.
Yeah, okay. A lot of time rain sound is like frying bacon.
Really?
Yeah, like you hear that.
Yeah.
It's just a close-up mic on bacon grease.
I could have been making all this money off of all times I fried bacon, and I had no idea. Oh my gosh. Anyways, I'm sorry. Yeah. I just wanted to, because I always am fascinated.
So we were well established in L.A. in California, and it was one of those. We didn't really think we were going to get away. Even when we were doing wildlife photography, we still came back to California every weekend. So we'd travel up to Yosemite and take pictures of goats up there and come back, and then spend a week at Arizona to Grand Canyon and come back. But we wanted to be somewhere close enough where we could get back and work.
Yeah.
But then my baby Penn, he came along, praise God. And but before he was born, we were sitting there talking, and I was just like, yeah, it'd be nice, And I opened my phone up to Facebook, and I happen to be part of this church, like tech directors forum. It's actually how I got plugged into a lot of these churches, even around the valley in California there. And some girl I didn't know had just posted this, "Come work with me at Grace Church." And I was like, "What's Grace Church?"
That's exactly how she talks, actually.
I mean, she's been on here before. You know how she sounds. It was Miss Kaylee Wyatt.
We love Kaylee.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And so I was like, "Oh, where's Grace Church?" And I click on it. I'm like, "Kansas?
Yeah.
What's that all about?" And then, I'm reading through the essentially the job description, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of like what I do now for all these churches here, just on a bit of a grander scale. And in California, I was mainly at one church, but I worked Friday night at one church, Saturday morning at a Seventh-day Adventist church, Saturday evening at another Christian church, and then Sunday morning at my main church.
Oh, wow.
And Sunday nights, twice a month at this other church in the other part of town.
Yeah.
So I was just an independent contractor at a handful of churches. Mm-hmm. And the idea of being just at one place full-time with benefits so we could have a baby and the whole
absolutely.
nine, it was intriguing. And I look at Corinne, my wife, and I'm like, "What do you think about Kansas?" And she's like, "What do you mean? What do I think about Kansas?" I don't know.
What a starter! I love it.
And
so Wizard of Oz.
I had never heard of Overland Park. Exactly, Wizard of Oz. So we Google Overland Park, Kansas, and it's this like the cheesiest YouTube montage of like the cool things to do in Overland Park.
Yeah.
But we were like, man, it's pretty there. And the number one thing that came up, it was like number one place in America to raise a family.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's
probably in that voice too.
Yeah, just like that. Yeehaw.
You're spot on with your impersonation.
So then I was like, well, you know what? What's the risk in just shooting them an email?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who knows? And so that was Sunday afternoon after church in California. Mm-hmm. I replied to the resume entry and sent off my stuff. Monday morning, and I'm 2 hours ahead in California.
Yeah.
So Monday morning, it must have been when Sheila came to work here at 9 a.m. Because I'm at 7 a.m. and my phone's going off, and I'm like, Kansas? What is this? And I was like, well, maybe it's that church. I don't know. And I answer it, and sure enough, it was. And they interviewed me for about an hour that day. And the person I talked to was like, I want to get you in touch with this guy, Johnny. He would essentially be the head of your department where you would be at if you decided to come here, and wanted to meet you and stuff. And I was like, okay. And then I interviewed with Johnny later that week, a couple days later. And the end of the week, I had one more interview over the phone. And then they offered me the job that before that next weekend even came.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is one of those divine intervention moments where it's like, well, you put it on your heart that you didn't want to raise your family here, and you were willing to take the risk. And so then I went and I talked to my my pastor and home church guy, and I was like, hey, man, this is kind of what I'm thinking. We're having a baby, and there's this and that. And he was obviously sad to lose me after a decade of working alongside him. But, when I laid everything out on the table, he was like, that's clearly the right move for you. and your family, and we'll
That's
miss you,
awesome.
but
Yeah.
go do your, go.
Got his blessing.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's awesome.
And within 2 weeks, we up and moved to Kansas, and luckily, because prior to that, we had been living in a van. Moving was just a matter of shutting the van doors and going to Kansas. So there was really not a whole lot to do. So we get down here to Kansas, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
That was literally, we got here in the very end of September. We had about a week and a half to just kind of sit around, and then October I got started.
Yeah.
Here at Grace. And
Yep. Penn was born.
Penn was born in January of 2020. So
I remember that. That was right after we had an all-campus worship night.
Yep. I remember Eric's, he was joking, like, now that you've done the worship night, your boy's going to be born tomorrow. But he wasn't due till February 5th.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was a big joke. Like, yeah, haha.
Yeah, I remember, people were worried about it. And like, well, what if Cody's baby happens before? And I was like, guys, this dude, and, I don't have any kids, so, births and stuff don't compute in my mind and how they work. And so I was like, guys, the baby's not even due till like mid-February. What's everybody so worried about? Like, Cody's going to be here.
And that was my mindset, too. Yeah.
So lucky the Lord was not like, oh yeah, you think he's gonna be there? He waited till the day after. But yeah, I always crack up thinking about that. But anyways, yes.
Yeah,
so that is
night happened, and then
small nugget of your life. And if you ever want to hear
30 years truncated.
I know, and I really, honestly, I'm sad because there's so many golden nuggets of stories within that I know that I wish we could go into. But Cody loves talking.
That'll be for an audiobook one day.
Oh, audio, little biography. Yes, when I read my biography. But no, it's just cool. It's cool. I love the story of how you got here and just the getting on Facebook, and I don't know. It's just always crazy to me how God has those random instances where it's
you
like,
would never think he was use Facebook. Or,
right.
Isn't
like crazy.
Kaylee posting that listing.
Yeah,
probably. And honestly, she's told me that someone she knew was also going for that same position, and that she just because she had the in and she had mentioned him, that was kind of gonna be what happened. And then I interviewed with Johnny, and everyone, Kaylee included, went over my resume and the things I had done, and it was like the stars just aligned. They were like, well, my friend was going for it too, but this guy definitely seems like the fit. Yeah. And then when I talked with Johnny on the phone, it was like me and him just meshed right off the bat, and our sarcasms linked right up. And, and that was one thing for me too. Like, I was interviewing and I didn't know you guys at all. Yeah. And I remember, I think it was the second interview, you were in the room with the girl who was interviewing me, and you were just like on speaker nearby, kind of like asking me things as she was asking me things.
Yep.
And ironically, now having a year of work together under our belt, like some of the things you were asking me, like, do you think we could ever do like a mix that you would consider ready for release? And I was like, oh yeah, that's what I do. I do studio stuff out here. And now with how our productions, because of COVID, have taken such a drastic turn to so much of our music is post-edited and released. We did that whole Christmas EP, and it's just cool that the things that were just an afterthought, that you were like, hey, this would be kind of cool if we could do this. God, again, just the ship always turned, and here we are.
I think I've had to learn that in my 30s, is like, it's what everybody would always be like, what's your goals in life? And I'd be like, I don't know. Like, but I've realized, like, God really does. I've tried to get better at that, at recognizing, like, there's something I wish I could do, or a dream, and realizing, like, that's actually, for me, those are, I've realized, generally, like, my goals. I just always think of them as like, oh, it's like a if I could kind of thing, not this is my goal. And but it's cool how I think God does lay those things on your heart, and then he somehow, some way fulfills those without you even like realizing it sometimes. Exactly. And you're just like, oh my gosh, like, we were going a direction, obviously, but we didn't know if this was like actually possible or what that would even look like. It seemed like such a huge task, but that's where it's been cool to have you, even and other people that have come on staff, is this like what seemed like such a huge task. When you have somebody in that position that just knows it and does amazing at it, it's like, it's so cool to see that work and to come together. And I think even just the online stuff, the recordings that we have done, it's just been awesome because what seemed like such a how would we ever do that?
Right.
And it's like you come in and just I've done this my whole life, and it's just cool how God does that, And so, but that's kind of what I want to talk to you about, man. Is I just love just talking to you about audio and the way you think about things. And one thing that I always tell people is we'll kind of get people who come up and say like, oh, this sounded so great, and it's two acoustics, or it's a folk band up there, or I think in December we kind of did like a more bluesy guitar set. So you mix that, and then you have we have multiple different kinds of vocalists with different styles, and even instrumentals with different styles, and you have to mix that together every weekend. And that, I think, is a huge skill of yours, because that's just not easy to do. There's, in my limited knowledge, there's multiple frequencies, there's styles, you're having to work with the voices and the band members, and then different styles of music, and trying to mesh that together to make a unified sound. And I think you have a huge gifting from God to be able to do that. And so what I want to do is just like, what do you think about in those moments? Because I know in our conversations, it's a very worshipful thing to you as well. And so like, what goes on in your mind back there? Because just even from being on the other side of and just watching you, sometimes I'm like, what goes through his head as he's just doing all that? And so just anything you want to unpack about that, of just like what goes through your head on weekend and how you go about things. And once again, this is going to be very, I'm sure, surface level of the depth of everything,
engineering terms and all that.
But just what, because I the cool thing, and I will say this about you that is amazing, and you alluded to a little bit earlier, where you wanted to learn like the science of things, and I think you have such an amazing gift of the science but also the art. And it's a cool gift mix that you have to know the engineering side of it but also know the artistry, or have the heart of the artistry in there as well, which I think is a really, really amazing mix that you have. And I've always been jealous of the engineering side of it.
Well, that was one thing that actually in the move out here I was kind of worried about. Was I knew my, especially with my main church of 10 years, I had a real solid grasp on the sound we were after as a church. And any church who hired me from in Southern California essentially knew me from the way I did things at this church. So if they were having me out, they knew the kind of mix I was going to do. And I could go in very confidently knowing like, oh, I know X, Y, and Z church is going to sound a certain way, and I know they want to sound like this. But part of moving out here was I wanted to really learn how you guys performed, what kind of sound you were trying to make, and then how I could translate that, best for this room. And then an interesting part about what I do is I'm campus support, so I have to apply that logic to 3 different locations, so what kind of always goes through my mind is, especially from week to week, we have very different styles. And I usually during rehearsal, as I'm kind of building my general tone structure with EQ and compression and that kind of thing, I'm listening to what you guys are doing intently to kind of figure out, okay, well, I don't want to do a contemporary rock worship mix if they're up there with banjos and violins, because it's not going to serve the song. And that's what I try to always tell my volunteers, or even when we're discussing things in the tech room like visual arts that are going to match the songs. I was like, well, think of the song. What is going to serve the sound best, And then the flip side of that with what I do with front of house is you also have to think of the room you're in, and all the way down to the amount of people that are going to be there. If there's a packed auditorium when we're doing big contemporary worship night, it's going to be a whole different mix than if there's, it's 8 a.m. on Super Bowl weekend and it's kind of sparse and we're up there with some acoustics. The mix, it's not going to sound the same. And you shouldn't aim for that. And,
absolutely.
How that translates to our different campuses, because we have essentially a small, medium, and large kind of setting, and the things I will do for the small room, while I want it to still feel like Grace, I don't want it to, I wouldn't just go in there with a decibel meter and be like, well, it's this loud at South, so it's got to be this loud at Olathe. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the hard thing, I think, that for some front of house engineers is they're either an engineer who doesn't really know anything about the music, or they're musicians who are just trying their best at running a soundboard. And I have the unique perspective of I played music professionally, and then I took on the professional side of audio. So like you were saying, I can kind of blend the two. When I'm mixing in-ears, I know, like, all right, if I was on stage singing and I was right in front of that drum set, what would I kind of want to hear? Yeah. And even if you don't have the advantage of having played music or been one or the other, you know, that's the number one thing, I think, is put yourself in whoever's shoes. So if you're mixing somebody's ears, think about the style that, well, they're the lead vocalist, they're probably going to want them, but they want a nice mix of the band. And, you know, then you learn people's quirks and stuff the longer you work with them.
Yep.
But then you have to get out of the musician's brain, essentially, and then think about, okay, if I was in the congregation and I was just experiencing this worship, what's going to serve the song? What's going to serve the environment, the mood? What's going to help? Because all of us, I know worship team included, we are just leaders. We are just trying to point people to God.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't want to have this crazy rhythmic delay happening during a real intimate part of a song, because that's going to... Someone who's having a prayerful moment, and then it's just like, Jesus, 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 Jesus. Like, they're going to not... It's going to suck them right out of it, and they're going to be like, what's going on with that sound guy? You know?
Right.
And, you know, it's one of those things you learn over the years. It's not a job that you're going to do in a church that you're going to necessarily get people coming up to you week after week and being like, oh, it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Though if you did a great job, they'll likely go tell the worship leader that worship was incredible.
That's what I was going to say. Is a lot of times we get people who will come up and be like, oh my gosh, it just sounded amazing. And I generally, and I'm not even trying to be nice, like I really do, I'm like, that's really because of Cody, because I've been in many situations where if you do have two acoustics or acoustic and piano, it can sound so cheesy and just cruddy,
empty, exactly,
and or if we do just, you know, two guitars that are more bluesy, like all those circumstances have a chance to sound really cheesy and thin and, you know, not good. And so I think, like, I mean, I'm thinking of all the different styles. So like I said, we have the bluesy, we have the folky, we had one worship, we had cello, a clean electric guitar, piano.
That was a great one.
And you know, did amazing with that. We've had two acoustics, obviously, and it's just so many different styles and frequencies. And then once again, with the voices on top of that, we have very different stylistic voices that sing, which is a whole nother.
Sometimes 2, sometimes 5.
Yeah, which is it's just a whole nother EQ slew of things that you have to think through. And so it really is. It's I think it's such a pivotal part that people do not, I mean, people just see the people up there, and so naturally, not to anybody's fault, they attribute it to that. But I think
that's my goal at the end, is to, like, I want the band to just shine the brightest that they can. You know, like, and whether from good sounding drums to a vocalist who might be really dynamic and is really soft in the verses and then is really loud during the choruses, you know, it's my job to essentially make that a pleasant experience for somebody listening. Like, some people, they will just put a vocal somewhere and it just stays there, and so it might sound good when they're quiet, and then when they're loud it hurts, or you might not be able to hear them when they're quiet, and then when they sing the chorus it's fine, you know, like so it's a matter of also realizing that the soundboard is more of an instrument than people give it credit for.
Oh gosh, yes.
You know, you have to think big picture all the time, as well as the details. You know, is the snare falling out of tune? All right, well, I got to cut some of those mids out that are really ringing and ruining the way the guitars are sounding. Like, you know, all these frequencies start to overlap. All right, is the high end of the guitars starting to muddy up the syllables of the vocals? And are the cymbals making the vocals sound harsh? Are the vocals so bright that you can't tell what the hi-hat's doing? You know, and you're constantly blending these frequencies and then thinking about, all right, if the lead vocalist is the focus of the song, but then it goes to like a whoa part where maybe the guitar solo kicks off, and you need to learn to, all right, I need to pull the vocals out a little bit and push the guitar up, and we'll throw some effects on to kind of make everything sound spacious. And you can't ever just set and forget. And that's a problem I've noticed with every place I've worked, from secular venues to churches to even in recording studios. People will just set a level and that's just it, and it goes out. And part of what makes a worship night or even a worship set on the weekend have highs and lows, peaks and valleys of these, the really rejoiceful, huge choruses down to the very intimate, heartbreaking verses that are sometimes there. You can't just have one pummeling volume the whole time. You want it, when it gets intimate, you want people not to strain to hear, but you want them to focus and listen. So where you pull the band back to makes an impact, and pulling them down for an intimate part means when they get big, it's going to sound bigger and louder than it would if you just had it loud the whole time. Because any loud sound for more than a few minutes gets annoying too. So you want the highs and lows to not only add to the emotion of the worship set, but also give people's ears a break as they happen, and then re-excite them as the dynamics of the song grow.
But I think that's what brings a room. I think there's a very spiritual aspect of that.
Absolutely.
If you're doing that, and the musicians and the vocalists are doing that, and we're all playing off of each other and paying attention to those dynamics, I think that's what brings the room alive in certain ways, and even in the visual side of things as well. And I think if one person is kind of like phoning it in, like that takes an effect on everything. And that's one thing that I really honestly love is, one, I see you back there when you're actively mixing, but two, it's cool because you could tell like you're actually worshiping too. And I've seen you take moments where you just sit there and just worship, and then you get back into it, and it's just cool to, I don't know, I just think that is a huge part of it, is that you're very engaged in it. For any of us, it's easy to, just kind of do the part and not be engaged. But I think, I won't even say I think, I know when you're engaged into something, just like in anything in life, it just shows and what comes out of that moment.
Absolutely.
And I think that has been such a huge unseen blessing for people on the weekend that has made such a big change that people don't know where it's coming from or why it's there, but I think it's been a huge thing, and across all campuses too, as you go to other places and help out there as well. And so it's just been really, really amazing to see God just move in those ways and do that kind of stuff, and it's just cool to hear. I mean, because I think that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is frequencies and stuff like that, and how you do have to think through all of that all the time, and like you were saying, the vocals and the hi-hats and the guitar parts and what to do in this spot. And I think that's where your artistry comes in so well. But like you said, I've worked with people who are very artistic, but they don't understand the engineering side and the frequencies and how to bring out that low end without muddying up everything. And I think that's just such a cool, once again, gift mix that the Lord's given you and how your brain works. And just to see that come to life and to see how that's affected worship at Grace, or music worship at Grace Church in many different ways. And so it's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, absolutely, cool, man. It's cool to be a part of it. And it's always one of those things, like I wish I could have experienced it prior. Like, I moved out here and I started mixing. I didn't even get to come to a weekend of Grace Church prior to ever hearing it. So like, it's one of those when I have, I've been training up some volunteers, and as I can get people bought into this, what we're doing, like serve the song, and then Grace, now we have our sound. We, regardless of the style, we do have a unique sonic footprint that we're chasing, week after week, even as audio guys. And I have a few guys who are really bought into that, and they can really serve that well. So when I'm working with them and they're mixing, and I can take a step back and just worship, it's a cool feeling to know that, like, that we are all giving it our all. You know? And
absolutely.
When you can just kind of detach and see that, like, because of the way it sounds good in the room, the church is letting go, and that's opening the door for you as a worship leader to be able to effectively lead them to the cross more so. You know, it's this big triangle of the worship band and leaders doing their job effectively, and the audio guys also doing their job effectively, and the lights helping to paint a picture in the room. And all of this just opens the door for the congregation, and all of a sudden you see everybody in the room with their hands up and everybody singing their heart out. And then, you know, that feeds then the band, which that, you know, we all are all feeding each other and guiding each other spiritually in this moment, to where if the whole church is really letting go in worship, I know when I've been a worship leader, there's nothing that feels better that makes you more free to then lead more passionately. You know, and when it's all a big give, when we all know we're on the same side, I know so often, you know, from stage to sound console, there can be a wall sometimes. And if there's tension there, then there's just tension in the room. It's inevitable.
Absolutely.
But I always try to, you know, understand that 90% of the time a musician on stage is trying to tell me something that they don't know how to verbalize, because they're not an engineer. They may not know, like, that there's too much low end in their ears, but it's just a big mud pile. You know, they say, I can't hear myself. And you go to their channel and you're like, you're maxed out. And it could be you're maxed out. Just turn your ear pack up. But then you have to just think about, like, okay, what might they mean? Listen to their ears and be like, oh, okay, well, there's a lot of this and a lot of that, and make some room. And then, you know, a couple songs go by and you'd be like, hey, how's your ear sounding now? And they're, oh my gosh, it's amazing now. Thank you. Whatever you did. And, you know, it may have been 10 small tweaks that they would have never known to ask for. But because then there's that trust that they know they can pitch their ideas our way, and we will do our best to execute them, knowing that we're looking out for your best interest. Then I think that helps everybody open up a little bit, and there's less things in the way of getting in front of worship, you know, we only have 20 minutes at the beginning of a worship set, of a church service. So we got to dig right in.
And there's so much. I mean, I think that's one thing I always try to, like, remind people of, even, is you're trying to learn a different set every weekend. You got about hour and a half, 2 hours, depending the campus, to learn, you know, 4 to 5 songs a weekend with different people, some kind of different mix of some sort. It's never fully the same group of people. And that's a lot to do in 2 hours, and tensions can be high. And I think, once again, I think you do a great job at this too, is you keep everybody calm. Like, I mean, I know there have been times where people get tense and it's like, I can't hear this. And you have a very real, and we've talked about this, you have a really real, you have a scenario of real time where you have to make a split decision of, do I come back harshly, or do I just calm the situation down? And you do a great job of that, which I think, like you were saying earlier, when there's tension in the room between audio and band or anything, you can feel it in the room. And I think I fully believe it takes effect on the weekend too, when people walk in. And one thing we've had talks about, and I think has been awesome, is, you know, for us to be cognitive of those things and to say, okay, how do we, you know, there is a lot of stress, and in all honesty, there can be a lot of stress on volunteers, because like we were saying, that's a lot to do in 2 hours, and they're wanting to do their best and do the best they can. And so I know when I feel like I'm not doing the best I can because of something like ears or something like that, I can get very frustrated. And then if I don't know how to communicate that makes me even more frustrated. And so, but I think you have a really good understanding and always do a great job of just, you know, calming the situation down a little, and you know, just taking it and fixing it. And I think it's just been really cool to see how the spirit in the room between people has even affected the weekend services and changed that because of just the, like you said, there's the tension. And then there's the other side too, where I think it is really awesome when everybody's almost kind of inspiring each other. Like I know as a guitar player or worship leader or vocalist or whatever it is, the position that I'm in that weekend, if I am confident that the sound out there sounds good and I'm being represented well audioly, it does. It gives you so much more confidence to play and just let loose and be calmer. And because there is a certain level of tenseness that you feel, and it's like, oh my gosh, this guitar part's like way out in the mix, and it's probably like making people's ears bleed right now.
But knowing you can just play it, and we'll put it where it belongs.
It's a trust thing. It's a trust in each other, and I think you've brought such a level of that into the room of just people trusting the audio and people trusting the visual too. Like I think that, and then the cool thing is, like you said, it all begins to inspire each other, and then it's like, hey, because you're doing this, that inspires me to do this, and I'm gonna, and it just it starts working off, and you just gain this like natural momentum, which is pretty cool. And then I think that totally is felt and seen from people coming to the services and worshiping, and I think there's just a very spiritual side to that is hard to explain, but it's there, especially
with something so scientific as audio engineering. To explain that there's a big artistry part of it still, and there's a lot of feel that goes into it, and it's a cool gap to bridge.
And I would assume it's probably like one of those, like, if you're on the engineering side, it's like, artistry, and if you're on the artistry side, it's like, engineering.
Exactly.
But it's cool because I think both are needed in so much, but to combine them and to see the outcome of that and the beauty of that is so cool. But that, honestly, I have another question for you that I want to ask is just like, and we've kind of touched on this, so we can kind of touch on it again, but from a spiritual standpoint, like, why, obviously working at church, audio is a thing, but there's a spiritual side of it, and I know you think about this a lot because of your role and the conversations we've had. I know you think about it, but from a spiritual standpoint, like, why is audio important? Like, why not just come in, turn the soundboard on, EQ's what it is, like, God will still move, which he would. I'm not saying he wouldn't, but like, why pay so much attention to this from a spiritual standpoint?
Well, there's a few reasons, I think. For one, like, if you're a new person to faith, a lot of your early steps are based on feel. So if it's your first time coming to church and it's just like the driest mix that never moves, like, sure, the band may be killing it, but it's just, it's live music. It sounds like when you're, walking by a festival or something. But if you're, because like I was mentioning earlier, you're trying to get out of the way, right? But you're trying to paint this picture and set a mood that allows people to let their guard down. And like when a song crescendos at the big bridge and it's maybe the words are really resonating with somebody and the lights are just right and the room feels good and the vocalists on stage, everybody's killing it. That might let someone new to faith let their guard down and be like, well, shoot, I am feeling this. I am going to worship. And then they get, that first God encounter. And that's might be all they need to kick it off. You know? And it's one of those things, as a more modern church, I see criticisms all the time on these church forums that I'm a part of, where some people are on the bleeding edge of technology with tons of line arrays and lights and the biggest amphitheaters and 100-piece bands and that kind of thing. And then you'll see people be like, God doesn't need all that. God's not impressed by that. Do you think that's... And sure, God can be worshipped alone in a room with an acoustic guitar or nothing, just singing or praying or in dead silence. Of course, he can move. He can do anything, right? But we're just trying to draw people into the grandeur that is God. There is, he is excellent, so he deserves to have our excellence in audio, in worship, in visual arts, and all that. And that's been since church has existed. It's not something that's new in the 2000s. Absolutely. Like, you look back at old churches from biblical times, they were designed in a way that when you sang on stage, your voice would reverberate out into the masses and sound great and had a nice natural reverb to it. And, you know, before there were moving lights and lasers, there were huge stained glass windows that light would shine through and make a beautiful palette of colors in a church while the room itself sang out. And all we've done is take that same idea and concept of, well, God deserves the glory, so let's bring him the most we can as people. And as artists, art is the way we do that. So from audio to visual to anything else, you know, from back in the day, they used stained glass windows and stone architecture in a big curve. And now we use, you know, JBL speakers and Allen and Heath consoles, you know, it's all the same goal has been in mind since the church existed. We are just trying to elevate worship and elevate people to God. Yeah. You know, while not elevating ourselves in the process. You know? And there's a lot of that, you know, people talk about celebrity culture or whatever between worship artists. Well, the same thing is true for engineers. People look up to, well, my mix doesn't sound like Bethel Church's mix. My What's Up Now, like my mix, is it bad? Yeah. And no, Bethel is doing what serves Bethel. And here at Grace, we're doing what is serving Grace.
Oh,
and,
absolutely.
You know, and if your small 50-person church is doing bluegrass, then don't expect your mix to sound like a big old rock mix from another church, you know? Like,
absolutely.
And I think that our job is to just, like I started off with, just serve not only the song, but serve your congregation. Most of all, you know, serve God with what is bringing your glorious sound to him.
Yeah. So. No, I agree. I think it's, well, one, it's serving the room. I think sometimes we can, you know, you got a room full of 20 people and you're trying to act like it's 5,000. Right. And it's like, it just feels weird. Like it's awkward. I think
that will feel like a show.
Yeah. Right. And like and we might not be able to express it, but it's like something just feels off in this room, you know? And I think that's where like artistic people have an intuition to those things of like, let's just, and once again, you serve that very well in the way that you mix. And, but I agree. I think so much of the conversation always revolves around the what and not the, like the heart of it, you know? Sure, yeah. And so you can have an acoustic set, but the heart of it's just not there, you know, or the heart of it is, look at me, how awesome am I? Or look how cool our stage is. Or look how cool our sound is. And I think anytime, and we're all guilty of it, I think, too, at certain levels, like where it's like, so sometimes, if I'm honest, I want people to recognize me. And then later I have to be like, okay, my heart's not in the right spot, you know, and walk through that with the Lord. But I think it is just that, okay, why do you have these things? Why is this important? Because like you said, at the end of the day, we could have nothing and just to be in a room and singing, and that God's going to use that. And so I think
a prime example of that is when our power went out recently. I mean, we had 2 weekends in a row where the power completely shut down. All our amps were off. There was literally no sound system. And you stood up there with an acoustic guitar, and the church worshiped just as hard as they did on a worship night, you know? Like,
it was beautiful. One of my favorite weekends, honestly, just because it was so, I don't know, there's something really beautiful about that. But I think that's it. It's, to me, in my mind, at least where I'm at in the journey of life and church and worship and music, because there are those things where it's like, why do we have all of this? And so I think you have to process that to some level and say, do we need it? Like, what is it? Right. And I think for me, where I've come to at this point is, it is about the heart. It is, do we feel like if we don't have these things, church won't happen? Because if that's the case, then in my opinion, it kind of becomes a little idolistic.
Exactly, they're the idol.
But if it's we can have church with nothing and we'd be fine, but we do have these things and we can use these things to show how amazing God is. So let's use that, and let's use your gifts and Jonathan's gifts, Kaylee's gifts, Kurt's gifts, Andrew, everybody, mine, a volunteer's gifts, Eric's gifts, like let's use all of these gifts and let's put them towards giving God the glory. And I think when we do that, that's where it becomes just beautiful and amazing and cool to just see what the Lord does in those situations.
Absolutely.
But then saying, yeah, like, this is awesome. But I don't know. I always equate, I don't know if this is right or not, but like I equate that to like the galaxies. Like there's real no reason that we know of that maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a scientist.
Right.
But to some level, like there's a bunch of planets and stars that to our knowledge at this point didn't really need to be created. I mean, apart from just a holy smokes, there's this huge galaxy. What in the world? Like that's amazing aspect. And so that's kind of how I view like the arts world sometimes. It's like we absolutely don't need art. Like art's not a you have to have it to eat and to survive.
Sure, yeah.
But it makes, I think it's the beauty of who God is it's the extra of, it's not needed, but it makes things beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a cool side of God, that there's this side of him that is, he just created beauty. It's not a basic 1 + 1 = 2 need, but without it, like, could you imagine the world without color and and without space and the galaxies and all that, and just if we were all just gray and we all looked the same and we all did everything looked the exact same. I mean, that would be a world without art. And God gave us so much more for no need necessarily, but just to be like, hey, here's beauty. So I don't know. I kind of think of it through that lens lately, which is then it's like, holy smokes, God's awesome. Like what? Like he allows us to do this? What in the world?
Right. And being one of those things that can be so subjective, Like,
absolutely.
And the funny thing that something so subjective can be experienced in a similar way by 1,000 people in a room or something. It's crazy.
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah, and then you just get into the side of everybody in the room joining in a song and then singing the power of that. Right, like that too is just always amazing to me, and the power of that and the sonic sound of that, and just it gets crazy. I love it. But yeah, man, that's good. I like that a lot. Now I just want to go like worship with people.
I know, right?
What are we doing right now?
Well, about
so really that's about it, man. I don't really have, we've kind of talked and I want to end with, not going too crazy on time, even though I could go a couple hours more, but,
we could talk about this stuff all day.
Oh, I know. But, I did want to say sometimes, I don't even know if you still do this. I should have asked you before we start, but I'm just going to put this out there, is sometimes, one of the joys of, the last couple months, I should say, is, you sometimes stream you mixing for our online campus, and that for me, so just a disclaimer, I don't know much about audio, I don't know much about how things work, but I will tell you it is crazy to watch you take these files, these audio files, and just the bare bones of them, and then just make them sound the way that you make them sound, and just the artistry of that and the passion that you have of that. So I don't know if you still do that, but it used to be on Wednesdays. Every once in a while you jump on and kind of live stream yourself doing it. And it's just been always like, once again, I'm not a big like audio person. I don't know a lot about it. I know guitar a little bit, frequencies, but outside of that, not much. But it was always like so cool and just interesting to see your brain work and how you pull in different plugins and different things. And it's like, holy smokes, I would never know where to start with all that. But here he is, just just pull, and you're so nonchalant about it too. You're just like, just pull this over right here, and then you say, we're just gonna take this EQ out. Yep, there's that buzz. Yep. But is there a place for people to watch you do that still?
When Christmas time hit, I took a break from it because it was Christmas season, was just kind of nutty. And then I actually started working with our film guy, Chris Anderson. I don't know if you've spoken with him on here yet, but I started working with him outside of Grace. So like my free time was a little more limited for that kind of thing. And then I've had a bunch of internet troubles. All that to say,
fun.
By the time this airs, I will have moved houses recently, and one of my big priorities was getting quality internet set up there, so that I could start doing that again. So the way it worked before and the way it will work going forward is if we capture on a Tuesday night, which we tend to, a few times a month, anytime there's a capture on Tuesday, on that Wednesday daytime, you can follow my Twitch, which is twitch.tv/Cody VanHoozen.
There you go.
And I will, I'll usually get about halfway through a set. I'll usually mix 1 or 2 songs all the way through, from everything from my drum EQ and compression down to vocal, whether it be tone techniques or tuning techniques, to balancing the mix. And the nice thing is we do so many genres and styles, like we mentioned, that every week mixing is a whole new experience. And when COVID hit, it was pretty funny how everything had to get streamlined. You know, if prior to all this, if you were to ask me how long would it take to mix a 4-song worship set, I'd be like, a couple weeks, of working 8 to 10 hours a day on a mix. Probably 1 for each song. Take a couple days off, let your ears refresh, come back, do some more mixing, master it all. But when you need to turn that stuff around from, we record Tuesday, I mix Wednesday, I give it to our video guys Thursday, they edit it Friday, and it is up online Saturday. My personal process had to get streamlined. And there is something really that now I use even when I'm not on a deadline like this, about quickly committing to sounds and sources. Gets out of the way, like sometimes, especially when you're working in a digital environment where there's endless plugins and endless sounds, and there's 100 reverbs I could grab, or 100 ways I could make the drum sound. You have to quickly assess, what does the song need? How can I serve it? And quickly do those moves and just move on. You need to just keep moving on. And you start to focus more on the bigger picture, and less about thinking about my snare at 200 hertz is so annoying. Like
I laugh at that like I know what it means. I'm just kidding.
And to answer your question, on Wednesdays I stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Cody VanHoozen. And awesome, you can come be a part of me losing my mind over sounds.
But that's a good thing, though. Just real quick before we end, is I've learned that too. So like in songwriting, I would usually, you go through and it's like you want every word to be perfect, and I get so caught up on verse 1 or chorus 1 and what word, I need a word, what is the last word,
and song over.
And you lose that momentum and the vibe of the song, and then you get so caught up in the minute that you forget the bigger picture of like, where's this song even going? And so what I've had to learn to do, I say this, I haven't songwritten more than I'd like to admit in the last year, but but what I have learned when I do it is get through the song, like get through it, get your bridge feel, get your verse chorus feels, and then go back in and worry about those little words that you want to change. And because what happens, you get so dead, like, what's that second line for verse 2, and then you get stuck there, and then by the time you get to the bridge, you're out of energy, you're tired, you don't even remember where you're going, and it's just, but I think there is a level of maybe everybody's different, but what I've had to learn is get that whole sound and then go back, worry about the nitty gritty, worry about the EQ of the snare.
Exactly.
Because then it's easier because you're like, here's the big picture.
Right, you know the vibe.
I know where we're going. I know where we're trying to get now. Where when I was in verse 2 trying to write it, I didn't know where this thing was going to end at. And so I think there is a level of...
and you can paint the total wrong picture before you have the whole song done.
Exactly.
I mean, even because I do songwriting and stuff on my Twitch too, when I'm not mixing church stuff. But prior to doing that, knowing that there's an audience of people watching you, you can't get caught up on a part. Like, you will lose your entire viewership, and nobody will want to sit there and watch you fret over, is it thee or thou?
Wait, you're putting thou in songs? My goodness, I'm impressed.
And, so that's prior
awesome.
to streaming my songwriting sessions, I have folders of hundreds of verse chorus ideas that then I just copied. So it's a verse, chorus. So it sounds almost like a full song. You've got nearly 3 minutes of a song, but to then try to tap back into those songs, where you were at, what you were feeling, and write a bridge that feels appropriate, and then end the song, and then write the lyric. Like, it it just doesn't work right for me even.
Yeah.
You know? So like now I will do the same thing. I'll write a verse, I'll write a chorus, I might write a melody line, but then I'm like, well, what's verse 2? What's the next chorus? All right, let's knock out a bridge real quick, even though I'm kind of getting burnt out. And then you sit back and you listen to the entire song and you're like, all right, now it makes me feel this kind of way.
Yeah.
Where maybe without the bridge, it wasn't even going to feel that way.
Oh, yeah.
So then your whole lyrical content would have had to change anyway.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
I can totally relate
and then
to
you
that
get
for sure.
Then you get to the nitty gritty after that, and then it's like, okay, let's really dive into
the these and the thous.
Yeah. Thou art. I want to hear the song that you're writing.
You got it, man. A lot of these. No thous.
Oh my
I
God,
straight away
that's
from the
amazing.
thous.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you so much, seriously, for being on the podcast this month. It has been
thanks for having
awesome,
me.
and I could just talk to you for hours, my friend, and just pick your brain and hear about your life and where you've been. And like I said, it was awesome to hear your story, but at the same time, just knowing you as a friend, I know there are so many other amazing stories within that I'm like, oh gosh, I wish people could hear that. But
maybe
but yeah,
another
man,
time.
That's
man.
right.
Another
That's
time.
right. So thank you, and thank you for editing this podcast after this.
Yes, thank you, future Cody.
Thank
for
you,
editing
future
this.
Cody, for mixing and dialing this in for us, because it makes us sound way better. So, but seriously, man, thank you so much, and
No
thank
problem.
you guys for listening. We'll see you soon.
Adios.
Again, thanks, Cody, for taking the time to share your heart, your passion for audio in the church body with the podcast. Very cool.
Yeah.
Man, it is. We're at the end of the show, so there's nothing to talk about or share that's happening within our ministry right now, unless you can think of anything.
We do, not necessarily ministry-wise, but we do have a few podcast things that are pretty exciting.
Tell us.
Well, one is, I actually realized we haven't said this in forever, is we actually have a YouTube page with a lot of our projects on it and many resources as well. It's just youtube.com/GC Collaborative. And so you can see videos and all kinds of awesome stuff if you want to check that out. And then also for the podcast, a couple of things. One is next month, it is on the docket to interview and talk with our campus pastors, which we're super excited about, and just kind of pick their brains and worship and you know, all the things that they see and just their hearts for it. And then our last one that we think could be really exciting for you guys is we want to get Jonathan, Chris Anderson, Ben, and me in a room and just kind of talk about this year and just kind of the process of Christmas and Easter. We've had a couple people say they'd be interested to just kind of hear how we go about those things and look back on them, the fun, the crazy, tell stories. It's always fun to look back, hindsight 2020, what we learned, how we grew, that kind of stuff. So that will actually be our podcast for May 1st. And then we're going to take the summer off. And then we're going to come back next year with all kinds of new surprises.
Yes.
Yeah. Candy galore.
Awesome.
So much candy we come through the speakers. You'll have candy come through the speakers, just hitting your face.
You might want to hold cups under your ears.
Yeah. Pam, pam.
Well, hey, thanks again, guys, for listening to the GC Collaborative Podcast.
Absolutely.
We're going to sign this thing off the right way, Luke.
If you could be so kind on your planning centers to either accept or decline, that is so much better than a question mark, and it really, really helps our hearts. So we would appreciate it. We love you guys. You guys have a great time, great week, great month. We'll see you soon.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the GC Collaborative Podcast. If you have any questions or would like more information, check us out at visitgracechurch.com.